DoD freight, Department of Defense freight. You guys move a lot of DoD freight?
Yes, we do. So we actually do that through two different companies. So each company, not each company, but each MC number, so can get a SCAC essentially get registered with the military, but you could have a asset one or a broker one, right? So we use two different brokerages, SCACs, for access to the military's boards. I think they call it open season or something, where you can get registered, and then past registration, once you're on board and all that good stuff, you have to go through Identitrust to verify your identity, background checks, all that. You can't access their boards without a chip on your computer, whether it's a flash drive or a program that you've installed. So if I'm out in Florida and I don't have my flash drive and something happens with the military, I need to get on, I can't.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine, and it's my pleasure to have Will Hopkins. He's the founder of Blackbox Logistics. Will, thanks for coming on the ThinkFreight Podcast. Pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Thomas. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. I want to just kind of dive right in. I think that you've got a really cool story to tell, and you're running a really interesting company. So I want to dive in and not take too much time here. So let's dive into your background real kind of like before we dive into the real meat. How did you get into the freight logistics world, right? It's a very different world. Not everyone like thinks that they're going to be in like seeking this path. So how did you end up here?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't know that freight brokering was a thing. So early on, like when I was pretty young, I got a little bit of trouble, so I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was bouncing around, working odd jobs. And when I was 18 years old, I moved back to Birmingham, and I knew a guy who ran a similar company. And man, he gave me a shot. I didn't have no college degree, no formal education. I was working at a moving company, and prior to that, I was working on a horse farm in Louisiana. And he kind of just gave me the rundown on what it was, and I said, "Yeah, if you'll give me a chance, I'd love to give it a shot." And since then, I picked it up and I ran with it, and haven't wanted to do anything else. And I've been doing it the last 6 years.
That's really awesome, man. So how like when you first got into it, like what did you really like? What was the sticking point for you? What was something you really enjoyed about it and like made you be like, yeah, this is something I want to really pursue for the long term?
Yeah, so the sticking point initially, just to be frank, was the money, right? I mean, I was 18 years old, no education, and I came in. It was a sales job where I could come in and it was cradle to grave, eat what you kill, and I was good at it. 3 months in, I was making more money than I ever had before. Then as time's gone on, there's other things about the industry that I've come to really love and appreciate, working with people of all walks of life, getting to learn about all kinds of different industries and manufacturers, and it's really cool. It's always interesting. But initially the sticking point was just really the money.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, I don't have a formal like education either. I didn't go to college. When I got into sales, like it was just automotive sales. So when I started that, like I just ran with it for the first 6 years of my life because it was like I've never made this kind of money before. And like I thought like, okay, where am I going to make this kind of money again? And that's what I found freight was like around 24. I was like, okay, like this seems really interesting. I had some family that had been in different aspects of the industry, and they were just like, yeah, you should go for it. Like it's a really lucrative industry, and I've never looked back since.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, so for me, what really did pique my interest, it was cradle to grave, eat what you kill, right? So
yeah, for sure.
I work a lot of jobs that are salary or hourly, and I might bust my ass or I might go in and just waste oxygen, but at the end of the day, I'm getting paid the same amount of money, right? Here, or like in brokering freight, if it's commission based, like what you put in is what you get out, right? So it was really
100%
fulfilling and gratifying to see my paycheck reflect my hard work at the end of the week.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I loved when I started in brokerage. I started at TQL. So it was full cradle to grave. Like everyone knows that model. And that's how I operated as well. Like it was very much like, obviously there was salary involved as well, but it was like they moved you off of that quickly once you became a junior broker. So did you ever think, like, I'll switch gears a little bit. Did you ever think that like, at 18, 19, 20 years old that you would go down the path of being an entrepreneur and starting your own thing and having your own company?
So to an extent, I mean, I've always had a pretty entrepreneurial spirit. Even as a
Yeah.
kid, I would go to Publix and buy a bunch of snacks, bring them to school, and then sell them for 200, 300% markups. I bought and resold socks, man. When Nike Elite socks were big, I would get
Oh yeah.
standard socks. I would dye them, sell them again, 200, 300% markups. I would drop ship socks, like custom socks, and I was doing that at, like 10 to 13 years old. So I always had it in me, right? But man, for a while there, like I said, I mean, from about 15 to 18, I didn't have a lot of direction. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I don't know. I feel like I'm built for this industry. Like, it fits my personality extremely well. So in hindsight, yes, but man, for a long period, no. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do. So it's been cool to see it play out.
How long ago did you start Blackbox Logistics?
We're coming up on 4 years. 3 years and 8, 9 months.
And you've been in the industry, you said, since you were 18. So how old are you now?
24.
Okay. So that's interesting. So you started about 3.5, 4 years ago, and you've been in the industry for about 6 years. What was the turning point to when you were like, I'm going to go out and just do this myself, right? Like, you could have obviously stayed at another brokerage and made money that way, but like, why after like 2 years, why did you decide to go out on your own?
Yeah, so we actually really it was closer to a year. We waited out
Hmm.
some time to some contracts. We actually started a dispatching company during that time, but scaled
Okay.
it down. Man, really, so funny story. My two partners, I have two partners, Blackbox. We all lived together when we were working at the previous company. It was a Roadrunner agency,
Okay.
and so yeah, Blackbox is an agency model, right? So we've got
Hmm.
a back office. We use their numbers, and they front our payables and all that good stuff. So from working in that structure, and then man, the management was pretty hands off, and it just kind of seemed like we didn't get a lot of support or anything. Like being a cradle to grave broker, if I'm bringing in a certain amount, like, it would be nice if you guys would pay a salary for some help. At a certain point, it's just like, man, we're just letting them have a percentage of what we're doing. We're not getting a bunch in return. There's no real
Right.
growth or vision for growth. I didn't see myself there long term, and neither did my partners. And I think it was a perfect storm that we all lived together. If we didn't, I don't think that me myself, being 19 years old, would have been like, hey, like, I'm going to leave this, the only like real structure and like consistency
Right.
that I found in years to go do this on my own. So yeah, just kind of played out that way, I guess.
That's awesome, man. I think that that's kind of like a cool way to go about it, right? I think that like not everyone has a traditional path of like how they become a an owner or an operator of their own company, right? And I think that's a really cool way, like how you went about it. Now, something you like touched on and I want to kind of talk about as well is you guys are on the agency side model. So how, like, what are the differences? Like, what's the difference between like a broker and an agency, and what does that model look like, and what are like kind of like the pros and cons in your opinion?
So from the outside looking in, there is no difference. I
Hmm.
mean, this is a fairly common model that I don't think people are super familiar with. I don't, for whatever reason, I don't think it's talked about a lot. You
It's
see a
not, and
lot.
that's
Yeah.
something like, and that's something I think is very interesting because it is the agency model. Like, I didn't really know much about it until I got out of TQL, and then um, I was at a startup brokerage. We were not an agency, but like I kind of started to learn about that model a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, this is a very interesting way to go about like starting a brokerage, right? Like you can essentially. I'm actually let you get into it because I think it's very interesting, and I think that because you have that direct experience, I'd love to hear it directly from you and how some of those pros and cons, like why you think it's not like talked about as much.
Yeah, so at least from what I see a lot of agents, not agency models, but
Mm,
one-man shops. Where I live, Birmingham, for whatever reason, it's super common. There's lots of agencies and people scale them. So the benefits to that is, I mean, there are a lot, but for one, you're using an established authority, right? This company's been in business for however long. They have credit established with the factoring companies, especially 2023 with all the rampant fraud. It's
Yeah.
tough to get credit, and there's so many bad actors out there that it's tough to get off the ground with brand new authority, no credit history. Um, Being an agency model, it really a sales office. You're just focused on getting customers and operations. We're not having to handle any of the billing. We get our split of our margin on Fridays. We don't wait until they get paid. They go ahead and pay us,
Mm.
and they go collect, and they pay our carriers. So we don't have to do any of that. We don't have to pay support staff to handle that. They help with claims. So I mean, really, it's the support, and then you talk about, which we've seen lately, is a few brokers go under. Interest rates have gone up, right? So we don't have to
Yeah.
worry about pulling on a line of credit, paying this person, or if like this customer ghosts us on 300K, like that's not going to cripple us. It's
Mm.
you're flexible, and you can be sales intensive. You can really focus on those aspects rather than getting tied up with everything else.
I want to touch on something you said. So you guys said you guys are paid every Friday, and then they handle all of the receivables and all of that. So how does that? So let's say a customer, like you just said, bails on 300K. How do they handle? How does like the agency model handle that? Like in the brokerage model that I'm familiar with, like I would have been clawed back on that commission. So is that the same way with you, where if that client ghosts you guys on 300K, you're gonna lose, you're gonna end up getting clawed back as well?
So it's all situation dependent. It's
Mm,
tough to give it a blanket statement.
absolutely, for sure.
There could be so many factors at play, but for the most part, um, which they have the ability to insure credit or not insure credit. So that's one factor, whether it's insured or not. And then past that, it's who's extending that credit. Are we as an
Yeah.
agency? Because I mean, I have the ability to do that. Am I going in to put this credit for this person that probably shouldn't get it, or are they approving it? At the end of the day, the best answer would be that we would get charged back on the same
Mm,
profit loss split that we are on for everything, right? So we wouldn't
yeah, for sure.
profits wouldn't be liable for carrier pay. We would be liable for our percentage of
Brokerage
profits.
revenue. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense because obviously, if you're trying to collect on 300K and only say X of it is brokerage revenue, right? Like you don't want to. Obviously, you're not going to be, you shouldn't be held as an agent like liable for that, because obviously the carriers have to get paid regardless. So it's just kind of a loss there. But no, I think that's really interesting because I think that like you said, like not a lot of people know about the agency model. Like it's just not really talked about. Why do you think that like it's kind of one of those like less talked about models in the industry?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I see a lot of, like I said, I see it presented or sold or advertised a lot just for one man shows, and I think that is pretty prevalent. Like you see, there's a few guys that I'm connected with on LinkedIn that are always posting like, "Are you tired of your
Yeah.
employee hours? Come work for yourself." I see that, but you don't really see people scale them for whatever reason, or at least the people that are scaling them don't talk about it. The ones I know in Birmingham, which I do have quite a few connections here that do a similar business model, they're just not really on platforms like that talking about it. So I think that a big thing on it is that it's companies advertising, right? Like you see the actual company talking about their growth or these hires, and some of them might be agents,
Yeah.
and they're really doing it. So for me, I brand and advertise Blackbox, even though we're brokering through another company. So people see Blackbox, they see me talk about the agency model, but I don't think a lot of people do that because I don't think that they scaled them to that extent. Or most people that do it, I think just do it to broker their book of business at their discretion.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that because a lot of what I've seen, and even like the 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 people have reached out to me and like been like, hey, do you want to start like an agency? It's great to just broker your freight and not really have to worry about any of this and that. But like you said, it's not really like a lot of people don't think about like taking the agency model and turning it into like an actual like scaling it, like just really like hiring a lot of people and being able to like take a lot of freight at scale. And why do you think that like you said in Birmingham, in your area, like that's very prevalent? Why do you think that like it's so much more prevalent in that area? I know, like I'll preface it with this. I used to move a lot of freight out of like that Birmingham, Alabama area. I used a lot of frozen and fresh chicken, a lot of chicken processors in Alabama. So why do you think that like there's the agency model and the scalable agency model is so like prevalent and big in that area?
Well, so it's really relevant to my environment because it all starts with. I mean, it's funny enough. There's this one guy who, and he's got his own authority, but he runs a couple of agencies in Birmingham, and
Mm-hmm.
he learned it from a guy probably 10, 15 years ago. That guy scaled it out, and he had a few people leave and do the same thing, scale, and a few people leave. So it's almost a tree. You know, you've got the godfather of agency
Yeah.
in Birmingham, and everybody else is somehow related through employment, right? So for me, in
It's
my
like it's like football with the Bill Belichick tree, or basketball with the Popovich tree. And so it just seems like there's a lot. Like there was one person who really got it, like that agency, scalability factor going, and multiple people were just like, "Oh, I'm going to go do this," and then it's just turned into like a bunch of different scalable brokerages in that
yeah,
area,
yeah,
or agencies.
it all stems from that one guy. I mean, you can trace pretty much all the agency owners or anybody doing it back to that guy one way or another.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How long ago did he start doing that? Do you know?
And I'm not sure the exact date. I want to say that his company with the authorities probably a decade old. A decade
Wow.
old. I think that he did the agency stuff maybe 15 years ago. I could be off by some years. You know, I'm not entirely
Yeah, for
sure.
sure.
But yeah, and he learned it from a guy probably 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's really cool. How has Black Box been scaling? How many people do you guys have, and what is your, I guess, your long-term vision for like the next 5 years for your growth of Black Box?
Yeah, so we're right under 40 people, 38,
Hmm,
39, something like that. We've had 9 start over the past month. 6 of those will be cradle to grave brokers. 3 of those are support. Um, I mean, we're running out of office. We're running out of room where we're at. So maybe we'll get a building. Maybe we'll find some bigger office space. I mean, immediate focus is really tightening up operations, getting all of our SOPs in place, which we've done a great job through 2023. Things kind of slowed down a bit, gave us a chance to catch our breath. I mean, we're pushing on 4 years. You know, first year we did I think 5 million revenue. Second year 26. So that was a really big jump and a lot. Um, and we started
for
doing
sure.
teams, and we didn't have everything written down. But now we're in a place where it's pretty turnkey. So
Mm,
hopefully we can make another big jump. 'Cause from second to third year was 26 to maybe 31, 32. This year we'll be over that, but not by much, maybe 35-ish. So I'd like to see another big jump. That's
yeah.
our immediate focus. You know, the agency model is sales, right? So adding more reps, adding more support, and growing our book of business.
I think it's interesting that you guys are, like you just said, you just hired 9 more people. So it's interesting that you guys are like scaling and growing while other brokerages are closing and downsizing. How are you finding success in a more like down market, is what people would traditionally say?
Yeah, so man, I think a lot of it is perspective and outlook. Our
Yeah.
guys are like, man, I get on LinkedIn and I do it all the time. I post all these just devastating charts and like all these, this stuff. And like, he looks at my feed, he'd be like, man, like it's real bad. You know, with our people, we're telling them there's opportunity. Where there's chaos, there's opportunity. All these companies that are going
Absolutely.
under the brokerages, they like, I mean, they had customers that now need somebody else to service them, right? Uh, so when we're keeping the same mindset, focus, and the way we go about things the same as we did during inception. Not much has changed for us. You know, like our shipment count's up. Man, we have reps growing week over week. We haven't really seen. I mean, it slowed down a bit there for a minute, but it wasn't anything bad. You go back to the agency
Hmm.
model, though, like we're focused on sales. You know, it doesn't really I don't know. I think it's different. I think that we're positioned differently. Brokerages are flexible in nature, but an agency model is much more flexible.
I think that's interesting because you said it's all about like how you look at things, and there's a lot of opportunities in the market, and something I reported on and talked about today in today's newsletter was just the fact that like container import volumes are higher today than they were pre-pandemic. So it's interesting that I think the biggest devastating mark on the market right now is just the influx of capacity we saw that fled the market from mid 2020 when rates started to drive up through the end of the cycle. And I think that until some of that glut of capacity really like ends, like comes to fruition, like I think that it's going to be a tough market, like probably through at least quarter two of next year.
Yeah, what's ironic is that historically brokerages would perform worse when the market picks back up and shipper rates
Yeah.
lag to meet capacity. So it's surprising to see quite a few brokerages, big brokerages, not mom and pops, go under this early. From everything I've seen and looking at it, I mean, it looks like we have quite some time until it levels out, like 12, 15
Yeah.
months. So I don't think that we're at the bottom, as crazy as that is with all this. I made a list Monday of like 30 companies. I got it from Craig Fuller's Twitter. He did a little
Oh
thread
yeah, I saw that.
where it's like, man, all those. I mean, those are some big players. It's not like Susie Ann's brokerage with her and her two daughters. These are
Big players,
companies.
thousands of employees.
Yeah, so it's heartbreaking for those affected. At the same time, it's necessary. Cycles are necessary. Um, I've told this story before, but when we moved into our first office, this is when rates were picking up. We had a long-time electrician, been in business 10, 15 years, and he came in and was like, hey, this is my last job. If you guys need anything, you can call this guy. We're shutting down. We're just like, oh, like, what are you doing? And he said that they were all going to buy box trucks because his cousin was killing it. And that's where we looked at my partner and was like, man, this is going to blow up.
Yep.
That's when it gets, carriers over correct. Everybody starts buying trucks. They tell everybody they know, and then they flood the market, and then demand drops off, and then everybody's just confused.
Stuck.
It's going to be forever.
Yeah, they're stuck holding the bag of, I heard there was someone, I don't know them personally, but I know them through a friend of mine, and they went out and they were a lawyer. He was like in his late 50s and spent about $5.5 million on box trucks, trailers, new equipment, like at the height of prices too, and was like, I'm going to go out here and just like, so he's like, I've always wanted to do this and blah, blah, blah. And he was basically retired. Like he was getting ready to retire. And this was like a lot of retirement money. He's like, I'm going to do this while I retire. And then now he's lost, like 85% of their trucks have been repossessed. Most of the trailers are, what's that?
So he's probably back to work now. He's about to retire.
Oh, 100%. He's back. He's been back to work for well over a year now. Like when rates started to really fall and he started to see like, like I'm in trouble. He went back to work and he was just like, there's nothing I can do on this side. Like I just have to focus now on like working towards retirement again because
Yeah.
it's sad to see, but it's also like people have to like look at this as still a business. Like it's not, it's interesting because I was talking with someone recently, and I have seen a lot of this on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, where they talk about or have talked about, in the past year or so, freight is being passive income, and it's just like, where in the world can you ever get that idea that freight in this industry can become passive income? And I know like it comes from a lot of these like small dispatching companies that are just like trying to sell courses and things like that. But it's like it gave a really negative and false sense of the freight market and like what it is that we do and how easy it is or hard it is to make money.
Yeah. I mean, you've also got people, still peddling the narrative that there's a driver shortage. You don't,
Oh yeah.
nobody really, I don't know. Trucking is very cyclical and it's a vicious cycle, also the barrier to entry is somewhat low, right? So it's kind of easy to get
Absolutely.
into, but for smaller companies, you feel it when it drops.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me ask you this. So I know you guys have like a lot of interesting freight. Like I see a lot of the stuff you guys post. What do you like? Do you guys have a specialty that you guys really like specialize in moving, or a lot, or do a lot of your brokers or your agents like move their own style of freight?
Yeah, so for the most part, we're probably 80% plus open deck, flatbed,
Hmm.
step decks, hot shots. That being said, we'll move whatever over the road, reefers, vans, expedited. We've found success specializing in steel,
Yeah.
flatbed decks. That being said, we do have a couple guys that do reefers, but that's not really our wheelhouse. I would say our specialties, it's pretty generic, would just be open flatbeds.
That's I I have a very, I'll be honest, I have very little experience with flatbed and open deck freight. I was a mainly like 90% reefer heavy broker, and then about 10%, probably 8% dry van, 2% flat. Like it was very, very small exposure to that. But I had people in my groupings that like were open and had a lot of that stuff. So I had some exposure to it. But what do you think the biggest challenge is in flatbed freight?
The biggest challenge, I guess, it
So,
depends on the.
and I guess I'll clarify that a little bit. So, like a lot of brokerages don't want to take flatbed freight. You see a lot of brokerages really trying to focus heavy on the pretty freight, so to speak, right? The refrigerated, the palletized. It's all produce, grocery freight, things like that. So, why do you think that like it's so like a lot of brokerages don't want to take on the open deck and things like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So the way I see it and how I feel about it is the opposite, right? So
Mm.
I would want to stay away from reefer freight. I moved one reefer load ever, and it was my third day as a freight broker at that company. It was three picks, two in California, one in Arizona, and two in Canada. And I was in there. We left it. They worked until 4 p.m. I was in there 4:45, 5 p.m. with the GM. We're trying to build these stops to Canada. I mean, it was a nightmare. The whole load was awful. Never touched it again. So,
That's where I thrive, man. Give me those multi pick, multi drop. Oh, I love it.
but we'll do some. We got some flatbeds that are built like reefer loads with, and we've got one company that we work with. I mean, 20, 30 loads a week that have 10, 15 drops flatbeds. But
Holy cow! What
yeah,
kind of freight is that?
it is parts, machine parts.
Machine part. Okay, so that's interesting. That's a lot of stuff. I know. So the most stops I've ever done are into pick drop like 10. So that's interesting. Like you've got like sometimes 17. How is managing something like that? I'm guessing it's no real different than managing something with one to 10, right?
Yeah,
It's just
so I'm not hands on with that stuff. I don't have anything to do with that account. Our second employee ever does though, and he actually worked with us at the company that we left. So he's
hmm,
been doing it a while. And man, the thing that makes those shipments is they're all in this general area. They all pick up the same spot. He has the same drivers that know the deal. They ran
that's
several.
awesome.
They run them regularly, so they know how it goes. But if you book some guy off a load board that's not familiar with it, I mean, he's going to be hearing from that guy every day for the next 12 business days, not business day, 12 days about
12 days, yeah.
the stuff going on with them. But the guys that have ran them, that they know how it goes and they know how to work them and how to do the stops and contact the facilities. So now they run pretty smoothly. I would imagine at first having trouble remembering, but I'm sure that there were lots of hiccups and it took a while to get a good system in place. But as of now, that they run smooth.
Yeah, it's all about building those connections with carriers and being able to just give them the repeat business whenever you've got that freight, because it makes it easier for yourself, but it also like keeps that carrier moving. And when they know the drill, it just makes everyone's life from the shipper to the receivers, makes everyone's life that much simpler, that much easier. Which is kind of why shippers want to use brokers and agents, right, to make their life easier.
Yeah, and I mean, he tells the drivers how it is, and
Yeah,
he pays for it. But he gives them the rundown like, hey, this is a load. This is what goes with it. And this is like what you might run into, right? So Uh, know what you're signing up for, and the guys that
Yeah.
run come to really enjoy it because they pay well because a lot goes into it, right? So we pay for the service, though it is a little bit more intense than your average, one-to-one flatbed load. It's been good. It's been good for his book of business. It's been good for those carriers.
Now, something you guys, I noticed you post a lot of as well is DoD freight, Department of Defense freight. You guys move a lot of DoD freight
Yes, we do. So we actually do that through two different companies. So each company, not each company, but each MC number, so can get a SCAC, essentially get registered with the military, but you could have a asset one or a broker one, right? So we use two different brokerages, SCACs, for access to the military's boards.
So how long have you guys been moving DoD freight? And let me ask this: I know like probably a lot of people want to know this. Like, what do you have to do? I guess what is like I know that there's processes to do it. Like, what is I guess the hardest part of getting access to DoD freight?
Yeah, so my partner William would be better equipped to answer that with all the ins and outs that go with it.
For sure.
There's a lot of paperwork. It has to be during a certain period. I think they call it uh, open season or something where you can get registered. And then past registration, once you're on board and all that good stuff, you have to go through Identitrust to verify your identity, background checks, all of that. You can't access their boards without a chip on your computer, whether it's a flash drive or a program that you've installed. So if I'm out in Florida and I don't have my flash drive and something happens with the military, I need to get on. If I can't get on unless I have that access.
Mm.
But then past that, it's pretty. Their setup's pretty simple. So there's this false. People think that because it's military freight, they just pay whatever, right?
I was just
Yeah,
gonna ask you about that. Yeah, please.
that's not necessarily the case, and that's incredibly frustrating when they're selling loads from like, oh, it's just the government, like, oh, we know that you're pocketing $5,000. Like, no, it's actually extremely competitive, and it's not what it once was. Say even 5 years ago, man. So many people have gotten onto their boards. It is super saturated, and it is highly competitive, and it's an intricate system. They have three different ways that they award freight. One is their ATR board, and essentially you can put in contracted rates for different equipment types. So we'll have a rate. We do state to state matrix, so we have
Okay.
rates every single state to state, every equipment type from flatbed, partial flatbed to less than 10 feet on a flatbed. All the equipments, and we've got rate per mile state to state. And the way they do it through the ATRs, they're going to put out a shipment. It's going to fall into that criteria, right? And you'll be ranked
Yeah.
1 through maybe 300, maybe a little bit over 300, and you're accepting or declining those loads. And it's a waterfall system. So they're going to start at
Mm.
the lowest provider acceptance, unless they have an awful reputation. If you've messed up some shipments, they might skip over you. But for the most part, they're going cheapest to most expensive. So you have to be competitive there. The second way is spot bids. Those are normally shipments that won't fall into a ATR posting. So it might be wide or it might be expedited. It might need team drivers. Well, they
Mm.
do have accessorial codes for all that good stuff. So hypothetically, they can put that on ATR. But a lot of the spot bid stuff will be overweight, oversized, have weird. Man, they'll put all kinds of weird stuff out there. Like you gotta. I saw one the other day. One of my guys came and asked me about it. It was in California, and they wanted to like demo a bit, not demo a building, but like clear out a whole building and move it somewhere. And it was essentially like a construction quote. And I was like, well, we don't have any business doing this. Let's not bid on that. So spot bids, self-explanatory. Everybody knows what a spot bid is. And
Yeah.
three would be solicitations. They're unit moves, so it might be those are for high volume moves. So it might be, hey,
Got
we
it.
want to move 140 Humvees from here to here. Give us an all-in rate or rate per truck. And those are the high volume shipments. Those are the ones you want really if you can get them at a profitable rate.
Like you said, it's very competitive to get some of those like contracted and probably I'm sure even the spot loads and things like that. How tough is it to get some of those volume shipments on, like you said, like moving Humvees or things like that?
Yeah, so the relationships come into play. Just like
Yeah,
anything else, I believe that relationships transcend transactional based shipment. So a solicitation is
100% agree.
important. Yeah, if it's important to the officer, whoever's putting it out, that they might be willing to. They might have a preset budget, right? Like, hey, I can't go over this number, and you might put in a bid, a little bit higher than the other guy, but they know you, and they're like, hey, Will's going to do a good job. Let's skip over, give him to Will. So,
Yeah.
those come into play. If you're working it purely as a transactional broker, you're not, going above and beyond with like service when you get loads, make sure that they have visibility. You're making pickups on time, delivery on time, sending in the right equipment. Um, then you can build up those relationships, and that's where you can get a little bit more room, a little bit more spacing. But if you're going in
Yeah.
there purely transactional, it's tough. That being said, if you know how to work it, I think that a lot of the companies on there don't. With all the rate matrices, it can be very intricate, right? And if they're
Definitely.
not, yeah, if they're not up to speed, it's like they're not going to be competitive just because they don't really know what they're doing. But it's tough.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be tough, and I think it would take, like, if you were coming in as like a new, like, even myself, if I was coming in and trying to bid on DoD freight, I probably wouldn't have like a clue's hell what I'm doing for the first 3 or 4 months, right? It takes a lot of time to kind of learn the systems and kind of what they're looking for, but also to build those relationships, because it takes time to just like move a few loads and build that trust and that that goodwill with those officers and with those people, those logistics officers. So I think that that's really interesting, and I think that's a cool way that you guys go about it.
Or even, I mean, changing rates. I mean, all the intricacies behind just like having a base rate. Like, I need to go in and like, what does this code mean? What are these acronyms and letters? It can get complicated. And, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're not the most efficient most of the time. A lot of the guys on there, they're not in freight. Like, they might be like active military and like have been tasked with this, and they might not really like know the trailer type. So I might send in a truck for this, and it's like, man, there's no way that this is not the trailer that you need for this, or like, I mean, all kinds of things. So it can be frustrating, but it is, at least for me, it's the most rewarding account that we have, because it is really cool to be able to work hand in hand with the military and assist with those shipments.
Absolutely. I think that's something that's really awesome. It wasn't something, I'll be honest, not anything I wanted to personally do, because I was just like, it's too nerve wracking in my opinion to like move that kind of stuff. Like, I was more happy helping to feed America with reefer freight and watermelons and blueberries. Let's feed America. That's a little bit less pressure in my opinion.
Yeah, but the stuff that we're moving, for the most part, they're putting it out on the broker board. It's probably not
Yeah.
that important. I mean, sometimes
Oh, for sure.
and we're going to treat it like it is extremely important. But they have, so the asset stacks, for example, there's a company in Birmingham, actually, an old asset-based flatbed carrier, and from my understanding, they built their business around the DoD, and they've got satellite trucks, so like real-time satellite imaging, Teams trucks. They'll
Oh,
be
wow.
they'll be armed with, I mean, assault rifles with like high value equipment. Like, we're not moving anything like
You're not
that.
doing
We're
stuff like
doing
that.
cool stuff. We might get to move a tank or some kind of like rocket launcher, but nothing of the level they are, where it's, I mean, they have like armed drivers, real time satellite imaging, and it's all the bells and whistles. They're doing the cool.
Yeah, yeah. That's the real cool, like, hey, like, that's the really, like, when you get into that kind of freight, like, at that point, I don't think it's really not transactional freight. That's the most relationship driven freight you can get your hands on, because it's
Yeah.
like, we really trust this company. We know that they're gonna protect our freight for the DoD. Like, we know that this is gonna happen. So I think that's great. Man,
Yeah.
as we kind of like wrap up, I've got one more. Actually, I have two more quick questions for you. How important, for each individual agent is it, or each individual broker out there that's listening? Like, how important do you think it is to choose a niche for yourself and to become an expert in that niche, as opposed to just being like, yes, let me take 25% dry van freight, 25% flatbed freight, 25% of this, 25% of that? Where do you, like, unless it's, with a particular customer, like, where do you think that, like, where do you stand on niching and choosing what kind of freight, or what kind of field you want to be moving freight in?
Yes, I guess it'll be somewhat of a loaded answer. I don't think So we would never tell our guys if whatever reason they had an opportunity to move some freight that's outside of their realm, we're never going to tell them, hey, like don't say no.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we would tell them to take it, but I think getting started, it is substantially easier if you pick one thing, you learn that, you get a customer in that industry, you can call other companies similar to that, and you'll be able to talk about what they're doing and not sound stupid. If I've never moved, like me right now with my experience, if I started calling refrigerated shippers and talking to their shipping managers, they would know that, hey, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and I'm not gonna do that. But if I call,
and that's the same thing with me with like flatbed and open deck freight. Like you're gonna tell, like I might be able to get in 50% of kind of the lingo and things like that, and I might be able to bullshit a few shippers here and there. But like the guys who are really in it, they're gonna know, hey, this guy doesn't really move a lot of flatbed freight. And it's the same thing with you, like you just said. Like they're gonna know, like you may be able to BS your way through a few conversations, but like when it gets down to it, like you may not have enough of it to be able to be like, yeah, like this guy knows his reefer freight, right? Like, so I think that's an interesting point. And to that, like, I think that, like you said, like when you're a new broker, it is very important to just kind of like choose what you want, choose something that's interesting, or choose something that can be, like that you can really hone in on, whether that's reefer freight, paper freight, corrugated box, whatever it may be, steel, trying to get DoD freight, right? Like whatever it is, like I think just honing in on what you want to do and just becoming an expert, especially if it's your first year or first 6 months, just learning like that industry, and then you can kind of branch out into other things.
Yeah, I think it would be very beneficial if everybody focused on one thing instead of trying to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and I think that it kind of helps. It kind of helps, you know. I hear a lot of complaints from shippers who do give like newer brokers or carriers a chance when they say that they're an expert in moving a certain kind of freight, and then right away they know like, oh, this is not an expert in moving this kind of freight. Like, and it sucks because I've heard that like from a couple of my shippers that I'm still friends with. They're okay, like we hired this carrier, and it's like they don't know what it is we needed, and they just said yes, we do this. And I think that can be tough for shippers as well.
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Well, here, man, as we wrap up, I have one more quick question for you. It's gonna be more of a fun one. So I know you're like a sports fan. What is your favorite sport, and who's your like favorite athlete of all time?
Man, favorite athlete of all time. So these days, in the South, Birmingham, it's college football central.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody loves college football. I'm from Mississippi. I'm a big Ole Miss fan. So currently, football season, that's a big deal around here. I'm a huge fan. We're playing Georgia this weekend, number 1 team or number 2 team, whatever. We're number 9. My favorite athlete of all time, probably go Allen Iverson.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, and then I've got the Mike Vick jersey. So maybe honorable mention there. He was another one I really liked growing up.
Dude, same. I'm a big AI fan. Like I feel like in the generation of like LeBron, Curry, Giannis, I feel like he is just so overlooked as like one of the best point guards of all time, honestly.
Yeah, pound for pound for sure.
Oh yeah, he just, man, the guy gave it his all, and his, you know, the cornrows were iconic. The guy's just a legend, man. Can't deny it.
Yeah, he gave it his all unless we're talking about practice.
Unless we're talking about practice, man.
We're talking about practice.
Oh man, well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I appreciate your time. Where can people find you online, and where can they find Blackbox Logistics if they want to learn a little bit more about you, or if they're interested in a job?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me would most likely be LinkedIn. You can search Will Hopkins. From there, Blackbox. I have the website in my on my profile, where you can go to shipblbx.com. But yeah, LinkedIn, if you give it a search, it'll pop up for you.
Awesome. We'll have Will and Blackbox. We'll have all the links in the show notes of today's podcast. If you like today's podcast, make sure you give it a review or a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. And don't forget to check out our newsletters. Those do drop on Monday and Wednesday at thinkfreight.io. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks, Will.